So I was listening to a podcast today. They were talking about Dune Part 2. And I remember when we discussed Dune Part 2, I talked about how the Fade Rotha gladiator scene I didn't remember being in the book, and how I thought that they had added it for the movie, and I thought it was a cool addition.
Mm-hmm.
Not true. It's in the book. Because the podcast I was listening to was talking about how they cut out a line. The guy on the podcast, it was like one of his favorite lines in the book. They cut it out from that scene. And it had to do with like poison knives and stuff. And so I was like, oh, clearly I need to reread Dune because I don't remember that at all.
I watched a studio binder video of how they shot Dune.
Yeah.
And what I had said about the way Jetty Prime looked was correct.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Nice.
The practical reason for why it was black and white was because they needed the planet to look different than Arrakis because it was going to look exactly the same.
Right. That makes sense.
The end story reason is because of the sun. The sun makes everything look like that.
Nice.
That was nice enough.
Validation.
Correct. Yeah.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cinema Heroes. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jake Stu.
And today we're talking about Transformers Rise of the Beasts. Released in 2023, directed by Stephen Caple Jr., written by Joby Harold, Darnell Mateer, Josh Peters, Eric Hober, and John Hober from A Story by Joby Harold. A lot of writers on this movie. And starring Anthony Ramos, Dominique Fishback. Who else? A lot of voice actors. Those are the only two real main humans in the movie. And then we got Peter Cullen, Ron Perlman, Peter Dinklage, Michelle Yeoh, Pete Davidson, Coleman Domingo, and of course, John DiMaggio, the great John DiMaggio. Underrated Joker, as we always say.
Yes.
This is the final live action so far Transformers movie of the franchise. We'll have Transformers 1 coming out later this year. We talked about hoping to see a Transformers 1 trailer. And then the next day after we recorded, the Transformers 1 trailer came out. We have not really discussed it on here, but Stu and I have discussed it offline. And we'll just say our expectations went down a little bit for that film.
Yeah, I was not impressed. It's frustrating because I feel like a lot of movies now are being made for young children. And I'm not against that because you should make things for the relevant generation.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's frustrating being a nerd. We kind of discussed this. I don't know if we discussed this on the podcast or if it was after we finished recording, but we discussed that, we are a generation of people that have an attachment to comic books and superheroes and science fiction and fantasy. And as we grew up, we never lost that attachment to those things.
Right.
And it is frustrating to see so many things such as Transformers and Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, to cater to an even younger audience, younger than I don't know. It seems like they're making movies, even Marvel and DC. It just seems like they're making movies for 8-year-olds,
right?
Which is fine, but I feel like it's leaning too far in that direction, and there's not much balance,
right?
Because I understand not the frustration, but I understand people kind of getting fatigued with the dark stuff. I'll never get tired of it,
right? But
being objective, I get it.
Sure,
you want to go to the movies to feel good and have fun. I get that, but it seems like they're leaning too far in the other direction, and they're losing their sense of balance and nuance when it comes to the fantasy genre.
Yeah. And I can understand it too, because like obviously they want to create a new audience of fans, so they make these movies for a younger audience, but I think they can do that without making it dumbed down is not really the right phrase I'm looking for, because I don't feel like Transformers 1 is necessarily dumbed down, but it definitely has a feel like they're not making this for adults necessarily. They're making this just for the kids. And I think it's possible to make a movie, an animated movie especially, that adults and kids can enjoy together. I mean, look at Across the Spider-Verse and stuff,
right.
So I don't really totally understand the direction they're taking with that movie. I hope it's good, but it definitely didn't give me the excited feeling I was hoping for when we talked about getting a preview for Transformers 1. So
yeah,
we'll have to see with that one. But
although it's frustrating, like I said, I do understand it. And some good things have come of it. I know I mentioned Mutant Mayhem.
Yeah.
And I do enjoy that movie. I don't know, it's just a personal preference. I would just like to see a more serious tone.
Sure.
I would, because I grew up with the kiddie stuff when I was a kid. As you grow up, you want to see more things that are relevant to who you are now, while still kind of honoring that little kid that you were.
Right. And speaking of being I guess you were a little kid speaking of being a little kid, you were pretty excited about this movie because we were getting the Maximals, which you are a big fan of Beast Wars, and I've watched about 14 episodes of the first season. And I had started watching it to kind of prepare for this movie. And I think I kind of stopped watching it because you got to see this before I did, and you kind of mentioned that it really wasn't necessary to watch that show before seeing this movie.
Yeah.
And so I would love to know what your initial thoughts were when you saw Transformers Rise of the Beast. You got to see it in the theater, right?
Yes, I did. I saw it opening weekend. I enjoyed the movie. I still enjoy the movie. But I was underwhelmed, and I'm still kind of underwhelmed. They took the approach that they kind of did with the first Transformers movie, where the Autobots didn't show up until 50% into the movie, almost 50% into the movie. They did the same thing with the Maximals, which I'm fine with, but they barely scratched the surface of Beast Wars lore,
right?
Which really ticked me off. They basically only use the characters in look and name only. There are only 4 Maximals in this movie. One of them doesn't talk at all.
Right. Not a single line.
They kill one, and the other one has like 2 lines.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty much all Optimus Primal.
Yep. And Airazor. Airazor has a fairly large part, but
yeah, she got a fairly large part, but it's mostly Optimus Primal.
Yeah.
But all in all, I do enjoy this movie. Objectively, it's average.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I enjoy it too, and I actually found myself enjoying it, I think, more this time around than I did the first time around.
Same.
And maybe that's just because I knew the Maximals weren't in it that much. Like I kind of knew what I was getting into this time around. And so because of that, I think I was actually I actually found myself liking it. I mean, not that I didn't like it the first time, but I was kind of disappointed, like you said. And I've only seen a dozen episodes, but aside, we open the movie with the Maximals, and then you're right, we don't see him again other than Airazor until I think at least the halfway mark, I think. And then it really is just Optimus Primal. Cheetor has like 2 lines. Rhinox just screams at one point, or roars, I guess you could say, at one point.
Yeah.
And then it's Airazor. And so Rat Trap's not even in the movie. Airazor, I haven't gotten to.
That disappointed me.
That Rat Trap wasn't even in the movie.
Oh, yeah. That made me so mad.
And so you said it barely scratches the surface. I feel like it doesn't even touch the surface of the Beast Wars lore, which I've barely watched the show, but it just didn't feel. I can't say that they're not necessary because they are kind of vital to the plot, but it was obvious that the filmmakers or the writers or whatever cared more about the classic Transformers than they did about the Maximals.
Yeah.
It almost felt like they included the Maximals as fan service for fans of Beast Wars like yourself.
Yes.
But they didn't really give them a fair shot.
No, they didn't. They didn't.
So
I mean, now, did you? I might have cut you off, but did you say that you hadn't gotten to Air Razor in
not
the
yet.
series?
No, not yet.
Wow, she shows up pretty
Later
late.
than you
I
thought.
hadn't. Yeah, you said you 14 episodes in.
Yeah.
Wow, I hadn't realized she showed up that late.
Right.
I thought it was like maybe 8 or 9 episodes in she showed up.
So far, I haven't seen her. So
Okay.
So I was unfamiliar with her going into the movie. And I am appreciative that I watched some episodes of Beast Wars before seeing this movie, because at least I knew who Optimus Primal, Cheetor, and Rhinox were, even though they're glorified background, aside from Primal.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah.
I would have liked to have seen more, obviously. And and I don't know if we're going to get a direct sequel to this film, but it would be nice to see more of the Maximals and see more of the different kind of, because they're called Terracons in the show, right? The like Megatron and
they're
not. Are they
Predacons.
Predacons? That's what they are. It would be nice to see some of them and stuff.
Yeah, Terracons and Predacons are like two different races of Transformers. Forgive me, guys. I'm gonna nerd out on this episode with Transformers.
Please do.
So, do you know like the Maximals' relation to the Autobots?
I don't think so.
I don't think you've gotten.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I know you've told me that the end of the first season gets awesome, and I'm gonna get there. I actually watched an episode yesterday. So I'd actually only seen 13 episodes before watching this movie, but I watched episode 14 yesterday, and I do want to watch the whole series. But I don't think they've touched that yet. I know like the leader of the Predacon is Megatron, and I'm curious how he kind of relates to the original Megatron. And I noticed, and I thought, because the start of start of Beast Wars, they like crash land on a planet, and they scan the planet for life forms, basically, and they see all the animals, and that's what makes them take those shapes. And so some, like one of the Predacons, who currently on the show is now part of the Maximals, is Dinobot, and he looks like a velociraptor. So I assumed it's like prehistoric Earth or something. And in this movie, Optimus Primal tells Optimus Prime that he was named after Optimus Prime. And so that was one of my notes. I was like, wait, hold on. And so I was curious about the history, because they don't go into it. That's the only really bit of history of the Maximals that they really even discuss, is how Optimus Primal was named after Optimus Prime.
Correct.
So I don't know. Yeah, I'm confused about the history of the Maximals and all that.
Okay, so basically, the Maximals and Predacons are descendants of Autobots and Decepticons. In the show, they go through a time warp, basically a black hole.
Oh, okay.
And they wind up in a different place and a different time. They wind up on. You were correct. It is prehistoric Earth, but it's after the dinosaurs, because they scan dinosaur fossils. So it's
I see. Gotcha.
It's before humans, but after dinosaurs.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And so Megatron was named after, the G1 Megatron.
Right.
Optimus Primal was named after Optimus Prime. Right. So yeah.
All right. And I noticed the first note I wrote for this movie was that they already had their animal forms on their planet.
Yeah.
Which at first I was like, that's kind of lame. But I realized that, I mean, you got to suspend your disbelief with these movies a little bit. One of the characters' names is Cheetor, and he just happens to, when he lands on Earth, scan a cheetah. Same with Rhinox.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, Optimus Prime, and they're all cars on Cybertron. So I get, it is what it is.
Right.
They just took those forms. And I guess it makes a little bit more sense within the movie for those characters to already look like that.
Right. And in the movie, they're from two different planets. Right. It's assumed that they're from two different planets.
Yeah.
But in the show, they're all from Cybertron.
Right. Which that makes sense because, like I said, they didn't take their animal forms until they landed on Earth.
Right.
And there were no cars at the time that they landed to replicate. So they took the forms of these animals. But yeah, in the movie, they're definitely from two different planets because they're on their homeworld in the beginning, and they leave their homeworld and come to Earth when Scourge shows up, and to try to keep the transwarp key safe. And
now,
I guess,
because they went through a time warp,
mm-hmm.
I don't know if that would be future Cybertron. Like maybe Cybertron has become organic or techno-organic.
Right.
But I don't know.
I suppose that's possible. The problem is the movie doesn't talk about it.
No, not at all.
If you hadn't watched Beast Wars and you didn't know about the time warp thing, that's why I was confused about Optimus Primal's line, because clearly he lands on Earth long ago and hides the transwarp key, because that's the whole thing with Elena. And she's, this, she works for this museum and knows a lot about ancient artifacts. She knows more. That was the other note I wrote. One of the notes I wrote.
More than the curator.
She knows about more than the curator. Yeah, I was like, this woman shouldn't have a job. But, so anyway, he'd been on Earth for centuries and then tells Optimus Prime that he was named after him. So I do feel like maybe there was a deleted scene or something cut out of their trip to Earth and how they traveled back through time. But then I guess it gets a little muddy because Scourge would then have to also go back through time, and Unicron, because Unicron eats the planet in the beginning of the film, their original world, which I don't think he would be eating future Cybertron, but maybe Cybertron just can't catch a break, I guess. And then Unicron and Scourge, they're all on Earth in 1994. So I don't know. The timeline's a little weird.
Yeah, it is, because Unicron tells Scourge to scour the universe and look for the Maximals.
Yeah.
When you find them, use the transwarp key to bring me to you.
Right.
If the Maximals have been on Earth for thousands of years or hundreds of years, so the Terracons must have been looking for them for hundreds of years.
Right.
That's the only way that it, that it would make sense. Right.
And so then his line about being named after Optimus Prime, unless Optimus Prime is also hundreds or thousands of years old, I don't know. It's just, I'm not sure.
But but that's the thing. How would the Terracons, if they were looking for the Maximals for that long, how would they only arrive at Earth? I'm so confused. How would they? Because when the Maximals got to Earth, it was a long
time ago. Yeah.
I think it was 500 years. I think she said 500 years, or like half a millennia, which is a mouthful. You should have just said 500 years. So we know that they've been on Earth for 500 years.
Yes.
But the Terracons started looking for the Maximals immediately after they left, and only showed up right after, or
the transwarp key basically sends out a beacon.
Yeah,
because Elena, there's a statue of Airraiser essentially brought into her museum, and she stays late. She's a workaholic, obviously, and she stays late and starts running tests on this thing, and it falls apart, which I felt for her in that scene, because that would be terrifying.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm gonna lose my job. But then it emits a beacon, which, by the way, confused me in the movie too, because it is this crazy huge bright light, and the shot they do, it's like her just standing there, and I was like, she's not reacting to this at all. But then they make a mention that only Transformers can see it.
Yeah,
because Noah can't see it. But then that's when the Terracons show up, but there's nothing about them arriving to Earth. They are the first time we see them is they're underwater going under a bridge on Earth already. So have they also been here searching for 500 years? It's like they know that they land on this planet and they just can't find them.
That's so confusing.
It is. I feel like there's got to be. I don't think there's any deleted scenes on the Well, there are deleted and extended scenes, so maybe I need to watch those on the 4K. But I was gonna say, I feel like there's got to be something that they cut out of the Terracons arriving or something, because it's all just very convenient that as soon as this transwarp key signal goes off, they're already there.
Right.
And like I said, the Maximals have been here for hundreds of years, 500 years, most likely. Have the Terracons been there the whole time? Or did they just happen to stop at Earth right when this transwarp key gets found? It's very convenient.
There's got to be a deleted scene. They could not have already been on Earth.
Right.
They couldn't have.
So maybe you know how well, no, that's after the key gets signaled. I was gonna say Optimus sends out that message, calling all Autobots. I was like, maybe the Terracons picked up on that message, but I don't. And maybe there's a line about that and I'm forgetting it, but I don't know. It's a little muddy.
Yeah, it's a little muddy.
And I didn't really realize it until we started talking about it. It was just like I was enjoying the movie, having fun, but then you start to kind of analyze it and you're like, well, this doesn't make sense. So yeah, it's interesting. Totally forgot this movie takes place in 94, by the way. When that popped up, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's another thing. And it's not just this movie. It's a lot of other movies too. When they do period pieces, specifically ones that are set in the 80s and 90s, and I guess 70s too, they don't look like they're in the time that they're in.
Right.
And it really, really bothers me. They do all the, the member berries, the Noah's little brother had on the Power Rangers shirt and
right.
all the music. Every period piece movie does that. Like
just relies on the soundtrack pretty much to remind you that we're in this time period. Yeah.
Nobody really looked like they were from the 90s, and it just the look of the movie didn't look
right
or feel like 1994, and that really bothers me.
Yeah, I agree. I don't feel like even the way they're, other than the Power Rangers shirt, and the way that any of the characters are dressed or anything doesn't feel like it was 90s. And really, it really does fall heavily on the soundtrack. When Elena was singing TLC on the plane, she's singing Waterfalls. Yeah. I had to Google it because I was like, I thought that song came out later than that, but it didn't. It was released in 94. There was something else that might have been another song or something that I looked up, and it was also in 90. So they just went with, they probably Googled like songs that came out in 94,
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But, it might've been a movie that Bumblebee quotes or something like that. And I was like, what was that movie? So I don't remember exactly, but yeah, no, and that's why I forgot the movie took place in 94, because it really doesn't feel like it. It very well could. I mean, there's no real cell phones in the movie, but I mean, it very well could be present day. So, and I think the only reason it is in 94 is to kind of bridge the gap between Bumblebee, even though this movie's not, I don't really consider this movie a prequel to the 07 Transformers. It almost feels like it's supposed to be kind of a in between those two.
Yeah.
It's definitely a sequel to Bumblebee, I think, because Optimus shows up at the end of Bumblebee. Bumblebee is also that same style Camaro from the 07 Transformers, and the way he is at the end of Bumblebee.
Yeah.
And then they've all been hiding out, waiting to try to kind of figure out how to get off Earth, basically.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a sequel to Bumblebee. The only thing that really ties it into the Bayverse movies, which this is produced by Michael Bay, but the only thing that really ties it into the Shia LaBeouf movies is the music. Because one of the things I said that I kind of almost missed from Bumblebee was the main Steve Jablonsky Transformers theme. Yeah. And they play that at the end of this movie. And I thought that was actually kind of cool, even though it doesn't really connect to those movies, but it's just kind of, it's almost like the Superman theme now. It's like, that is the Transformers theme,
Yeah, that was my favorite part of the movie, actually. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like just as a Beast Wars fan, it was disappointing. I can't even lie about that.
Yeah.
But there are fun moments in the movie. I think all the action is fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
I love the battle at the museum, and of course the third act is great. The highway scene is great, but the story itself is just so cookie cutter.
Right.
It is so regular.
Yeah. Which is a shame because I really like Anthony Ramos. I think is really good in this movie. He's really good in pretty much everything I've ever seen him in, and I really like the character of Noah and his reaction. I wrote down. I took quite a few notes for this. It's all just kind of little stuff just to remind me of stuff to talk about. But his line when he's in Mirage and they're escaping. Yeah. Basically, Optimus has just made a call to all Autobots, and Mirage is like, all right, time to go. You're in the car, so you're coming with me. And they're running away from the cops and stuff. And he's driving backwards, and then it transforms around him, and it cuts to Noah, and he goes, nah. I was like, that was really well done. I like that.
I mean, Anthony Ramos he's doing the best he can, because some of this dialogue is not good. Like there's a part where him and his little brother are sitting at the table, and his brother's hand stiffens up.
Right.
And he says, what's going on? And he looks at his hand. He said, the sickle cell must be blocking the blood flow. I'm like, who talks like that?
Yeah, I agree.
Like, well, now we know he has sickle cell.
Right.
Well, it's like it was just so, like, the exposition in that one line was just so on the nose. I was like, there should have been, there had to have been a better way.
Had to have been
explained.
You could even, if you need to tell us that he's, it's sickle cell or whatever, have that be at the hospital when he's talking to the woman about the accounts, Yeah. And he could say like, well, my brother's got this. Where am I supposed to go? Type of thing, Yeah. Some of the, I didn't have too much of a problem with the dialogue, but yeah, that line's pretty bad.
and even some of Optimus's dialogue is
clunky,
kind of off. Yeah. I don't think that's necessarily on Peter Cullen. It could be, but I don't think so. I think that maybe just the way he was directed, because I thought what you said about Bumblebee, how they had already recorded somebody else for the voice of Optimus because they wanted a younger voice and it just wasn't working, and they had Peter Cullen come in and re-record those lines and had him say it the way the other actor said it. And I wondered if that was the case with this movie, because there are some lines where it sounds very awkward. Like Optimus's cadence is off. He's not speaking with the normal rhythm that Peter Cullen usually has.
Now that you mention, I picked up on that too. I didn't write that down, but you're right. There's a couple of lines where it does almost feel like it also kind of, and I'm sure they do this with all sorts of voiceover stuff, but it almost felt like they were kind of mixing and matching. Mm-hmm. So like the first part of a sentence or maybe the first line of a 2-sentence line would be from like one take, and then the second line, it felt very different. Yeah. It was interesting. Yeah, I remember that happening. I don't remember the line, unfortunately, but I remember one time in particular being like, that was weird. It just didn't sound like Peter Cullen, really. It sounded it sounded different. Yeah. And this Optimus is a little different than we've seen or than we're used to, I guess, especially like with the Shia movies. And that was the note I wrote. He's so distrusting of humans in this movie.
Yeah, he's very cynical.
Yeah. Which is way different than how he is usually portrayed, I think. Mm-hmm. Typically he's very protective of humans and knows that like they're on our planet and they're basically, they're trying not to like mess things up for us. Whereas all he cares about is leaving in this movie, really. And he doesn't trust humans to help them do that. And which is understandable. And then of course that's kind of his character arc. By the end of the movie, he's very trusting of Noah and everything, but it was different. It was interesting.
Well, it makes sense because he hasn't been on Earth that long. I think he's been on Earth, like 8 years?
Yeah, something like that. And he's been in hiding the whole time. So he hasn't had much interaction with humans. Yeah. And I mean, I don't blame him. He sees how destructive we can be. So yeah. I remember the movie reference now because I actually wrote it down. It's right here. And I didn't have to look this up. I knew it was 94. But again, it was just they chose a movie from 94 because this movie takes place in 94. And it was Mirage when they get to like the rendezvous spot And he's talking to Noah, and he's like, "That was awesome, man." Blah 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 blah. He ends. He goes, "I like it a lot."
I like it a lot. Yeah.
It's just, Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber.
Which I thought was pretty great.
I like it a lot.
I like it a lot. Another note I had was the way they convinced Noah to help them steal the transwarp key from the museum is Mirage tells Noah that he can sell him. And I guess the idea is Noah would sell this car to whoever for a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And then Mirage would be like, "I'm out." And I guess the car would be reported stolen or something at that point.
Yeah. Once the transaction was over, and he's like, "All right, I'm gone."
And the note I wrote, and this is just me probably overthinking a Transformers movie, but I said, how would Noah sell Mirage? Does Mirage have a title? Like, is he like?
I thought of the same thing. I was like, he got a title and a VIN number, and
right? Like, how would he sell this car?
Yeah, I thought of that same thing. That's crazy.
So it's a flaw in the plan, in my opinion. But, and then the very next note I wrote, because it deals with them going to the museum, I believe, is Noah's like, "Well, how are we going to get in there? There's security everywhere and stuff." And Mirage is like, "I thought of that." And it shows them pulling up to the museum in a large, like, garbage truck.
Yeah.
And that's Mirage. And my note was, and again, maybe I'm way off on this. You're more of a Transformers fan than I am, so maybe you would know the answer to this. But I thought, like, the Transformers kind of car choice, their main vehicle or whatever, like, for example, for Bumblebee, it's the Camaro. For Optimus, it's the truck. I thought that was kind of relative to their size, like their robot size. And so Mirage is usually a Porsche. Like, where does he get the extra mass or whatever to become a dump truck?
That's a movie thing.
That's what I was going to say. And it's also, they don't say this in the movie, but I could see, like, my headcanon is he's Mirage, and he was able to create these holographic projections of himself in like 5 different cars. So maybe he's just part of the dump truck, and the rest of the dump truck is a Mirage to make him look bigger.
Right.
And that's the only way I could make that work in my brain, because it just didn't make sense to me that he could go from transforming into a Porsche to then transforming into a dump truck. It's like, it just doesn't, size wise, it doesn't really make sense to me. But
yeah, that's a movie thing. They've done that a few times in the Transformers movies. Even in the first one, the Allspark takes up this whole room, and then Bumblebee like just
shrinks it down. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. Cybertron, Cybertronian technology, I guess.
Yeah.
That's how you get around that type of stuff. It's just like, it's Cybertron technology, we don't understand it.
There was another Transformer that did the same thing.
Well, my question was, like, could Optimus Prime turn into a Mini Cooper? Could he, or like, could he go smaller than? So I was just
Soundwave. Soundwave in the first 2 movies was a satellite.
Oh yeah.
And then in Dark of the Moon, he was whatever car that Patrick Dempsey gave.
Right.
Gave her.
It's kind of a sports car type.
Yeah. He was very small.
Yeah, that's true.
He was smaller than Bumblebee.
Right. So I guess it's just something they do. It's just convenience. Whatever the story needs.
Yeah.
Is what they can transform into. It threw me off a little bit. The museum fight scene was pretty cool. That's when we had seen Scourge in the beginning, and I actually thought the fight between Ape-Link and Scourge was a little too short. I know the movie needs to get moving, but Ape-Link seemed like the leader. He was the leader of the Maximals before kind of handing over leadership duties to Optimus Primal. But he gets killed, he jumps in the air basically and then gets stabbed. I was like, all right, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a fight between these two if they're supposed to be, he's supposed to be like the best. But that's just what, that's a nitpick, I guess.
I think they were also trying to show how like scary Scourge can be.
Right.
Because he, like, at the museum fight, he is giving the Autobots the business.
Yeah. Which I like that scene more than the Ape-Link scene, because he's scarier in the museum scene. Like, he seems more formidable. Whereas in the Ape-Link scene, he's stabbed well. It's just like... So.
Yeah. And Ape-Link, I think Ape-Link is from the Japanese 2D animated version of Beast Wars.
Oh wow, I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was a sequel series or if it was its own thing. I'd like to think that it was its own thing.
Right.
But yeah, that was he wasn't part of the he's not a part of the American Beast Wars lore.
Yeah, I looked him up because I was wondering about that, and I was curious if I just hadn't gotten to him or if he was created for the movie. And he wasn't created for the movie, but I couldn't figure out where he originated, you know. It was difficult to kind of figure that out. So
yeah. I know he had a toy.
Oh, okay, cool.
I didn't have that toy, and I think he was in the Japanese version of Beast Wars, but he was definitely not in the American version. I know that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, the museum fight scene is pretty amazing. That's when Air Razor shows up, breathes fire all over the place, which is pretty sweet.
Which is not something that she can do in the show.
So that was something they added for the movie.
Yeah.
Made her a dragon eagle, basically.
Yeah.
It was cool. It was cool seeing it in the movie, but yeah, I didn't realize that was not one of her powers, I guess. This is also where Bumblebee dies, right? He dies at the museum, right?
He dies at the museum.
Scourge takes his Autobot insignia. That was one thing I kind of liked about Scourge was his trophies. I mean, it was like all over his arm, like all the different, there were a couple different Autobots, and then he had the primal one that he took from Ape Link and stuff, which was cool. Or not primal, Maximal.
The Maximal.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, when Bumblebee died, it was you knew where the movie was gonna go from there. You knew he was gonna come back in the third act. Like it just they did not try to subvert expectations in this movie. They did not. This movie was I feel like they made this movie on easy mode.
Yeah.
And I don't want, like, making a movie is hard to do.
Right.
But I feel like when it comes to writing the story, they were like, this is good enough.
Right.
Let's just get this movie made. And that disappoints me.
Yeah, and that bothers me too, because I don't think that's, you and I, we don't like to just bash on any movie, really, unless it's Transformers: The Last Night. Because we all know that it's really difficult to make a movie, and it's basically a miracle any movie gets made and is made well.
Yeah.
But I do think if you start off with a subpar script, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And I kind of think that is what this movie did. Yeah.
Yes, you got to nail that script. You got to make it the best it can be. Like it's
right.
No script is perfect, obviously, but you got to make it the best it can be. And I just don't feel like this was the best it could have been. Like you have the benefit of source material. You're not creating it from scratch. You can pick and choose what you want and what you want to put together. That's why the MCU works so well, because they cherry pick different, like the best things from different stories and make one fluid story, and then they take that and expand it into this larger universe. And I feel like with Transformers, all of them, not just this one, but I feel like with Transformers, they're just making a lot up off the top of their head, which is why a lot of people don't really care for these movies. It's understandable. Yeah. But for me, when I go to see these movies, I just want to see robots blowing stuff up.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like, I have a certain expectation when I go see a Transformers movie, and they're not super high expectations.
Yeah.
And which is why like I said in the beginning of this episode, I like this movie. I enjoy watching it. And I had fun watching it yesterday, but it is not, like you said, it was made on easy mode. That's exactly kind of how it feels. And like, I didn't feel anything when Bumblebee dies, because we know he's coming back.
We already knew.
That's also just an inherent problem with prequels in general, especially when the prequels have the same characters that are in the previous, in the movies that come afterwards. There's no real threat, because we know they have to survive to make it to the next movie, basically.
Right. It wasn't like in The Dark Knight when Commissioner Gordon died.
Right.
I thought that was it. I was like, he's not coming back. I was like, they really killed him.
I think I had a similar reaction seeing it the first time. I think my initial reaction was, there's no way they killed off Commissioner Gordon. But then as the movie kind of goes, I was like,
and you don't see him, really and they kind of they playing it up. I was like,
right,
they really killed Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, and so you're right, and so that is not what happened with this movie, because seeing the light go from Bumblebee's eyes, we're like, well, we know he's going to come back.
Yeah,
and I didn't even really, the way they brought him back was just kind of okay as well. Like there's a energon surge and it just happens to revive him on the stone that he's like laying on or whatever. So it was just okay. You know, that whole thing. I do like him coming into the battle though, with the LL Cool J song playing and stuff. I thought that was pretty good.
Don't call it a comeback.
Right. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. I really like the third act of this movie. Although they do, like, they're fighting in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's literally like just open space.
Right.
Because it's almost as if they didn't have the budget to animate buildings and trees and stuff.
Right.
Deadpool would have had a field day with this movie. But I do really enjoy that third act when the Autobots and Maximals finally come together. There's another kind of fan servicey thing. We get an exosuit.
Yes, yeah.
Which is the first time that we've gotten an exosuit in this franchise. The exosuit has been in numerous versions and generations of Transformers. The first time the first vivid memory that I have of the exosuit was in Transformers Armada. When the main character from there got his exosuit. I kind of like the suit, but I kind of don't. It felt very G.I. Joe-ish. Right. Which we'll get to in a minute, but it
right.
It reminded me of Stephen Summers' G.I. Joe. It felt very loose and cartoony, and Anthony Ramos's face looked terrible.
Yeah, that's my big issue with it, is that they didn't have the greatest time with the CG around his face, because his face looks very fake.
Yeah.
Or the stuff around his face just seems very noticeably fake. They had a hard time animating that or something. I kind of like the exosuit, and I think part of the reason I like it is because it looks kind of 80s cartoonish. Yeah. And so it kind of almost feels like it was pulled from, I don't know if there's any exosuits in the original series, but it kind of feels like it was pulled from that. And so
Spike has an exosuit in the movie. I don't know if he has one in the series, but I know he has one in the movie.
So I kind of liked it. I kind of dug it. And I liked how Mirage sacrifices himself and kind of gives his parts to Noah to be able to have the exosuit and stuff. I thought it was. Yeah. So yeah, that actually kind of, aside from his face, that kind of worked for me. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely cool when he was riding on the back of Bumblebee. That was great. Like I said, the action scenes in this movie are awesome. They are awesome. There's no denying.
Stephen Cable Jr. did a good job with the action scenes. I agree with that.
Yeah. When, the Autobots and the Maximals come together and they're running in the battle, and Optimus Primal finally says maximize. Oh.
That was actually one of the notes I wrote. I wrote, was it awesome for Stu when Primal yelled maximize? Because it was awesome for me, and I'm not even as much of a Beast Wars fan as you are. So yeah.
Oh yeah, it was definitely awesome. That was one of my favorite moments. And then the till all are one scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's borderline silly, but I really like the scene where Noah is trying to save Optimus Prime.
Yes.
And he says that to him, until all are one. And he's pulling him and he's using as much as he can, and then Optimus, it almost doesn't work, and then Primal shows up and then repeats that line and is able to save him. And that scene was awesome.
And then Optimus transforms.
Yeah,
and then the music starts playing. Oh my god, that was so satisfying.
That was very satisfying. I agree. Something unsatisfying. So he says maximize, and we see the Maximals transform into their robot form. Mm-hmm. I just wish there was more.
Yes, I agree.
I wish, because we see kind of these sweeping long kind of
shots.
one take shots of Cheetor and Rhinox and even Primal. But it's just, they don't really focus on them that much. It's more about the Autobots really than it is the Maximals. And I kind of wish I wish they had done a little bit more of including the Maximals. And I mean, they're obviously a big part of the fight, but it's just, I wanted to see more of the Maximals.
What I'm hoping happens, it probably won't, but I'm hoping that they make a prequel to this movie with just the Maximals.
That'd be cool.
It probably won't happen because I don't think enough people, I don't think there's enough
of an audience.
I don't think there's enough interest in the general audience for Beast Wars.
Right.
But if I were to make a Transformers movie, it would be an adaptation of Beast Wars. And I would do it, like Star Trek, because I firmly believe that Star Trek is the inspiration for Beast Wars.
Which, are you talking about the 09 Star Trek?
No.
Where they travel back in time and all that stuff?
The original
series? Oh, wow.
The original series.
I could see that. I mean, they have the ship and everything. And so
yeah, because they got the ship. They're explorers, and because in the show, the Decepticons are military. Their ship is a battle cruiser.
Mm-hmm.
Not Decepticons, Predacons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Maximals, their ship is an exploration ship, and they get caught up with Megatron and his Predacons, and they're ill prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So the Maximals are underdogs because they don't have the firepower, nor do they have the manpower or Transformers power to have a fair fight. So I would definitely treat it as an underdog story, but still have some of that exploration type sci-fi in it from Star Trek.
Yeah.
And like kind of weave in themes, like kind of like some like existential themes. Like my Transformers movie would be awesome.
You should write it. It'd be fun to read.
I should.
Well, before we go into a rating, I do want to talk about the design of the Maximals. I want to get your opinion on how you feel, how they look in the movie. Are you a fan of it? Do you like it? Because on the cartoon show, which is obviously a cartoon made for children, and it was also one of the first like computer generated cartoon shows. And it has, it's dated, but they all look like animals. They don't, you can't really tell they're robots when they're in their animal form. Whereas in this movie, even as animals, they have the, metal looking faces and like, I actually really like when Primal and Rhinox like are roaring, how you can kind of see like there's like the cylinder in their throat that like just the mechanics and stuff.
It's like a turbine like turning.
Yeah. It's super cool, I thought. But I was curious what you thought of it and how, because like Primal has like fur and stuff underneath some of his metal parts and whatnot, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I really like the design of the Transformer, of the Maximals, in their beast forms and their robot forms. My least favorite probably Rhinox, and it sucks that we didn't get to see Air Razor transform. That really bothers me.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't. That's a good point.
But I really like the way they look. In the show, you haven't gotten this far, but they're not going to stay that way.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I need to keep watching it, I guess.
Yes, you do.
Well, what would you rate Transformers Rise of the Beast, Stu?
I like this movie. I know we've criticized it quite a bit, but I still like this movie. I've actually watched this movie about 5 times. Just out of pure nostalgia for, the Maximals.
Yeah, of course.
As minuscule as they are in this movie.
Right. It's still fun to see them on the...
It's still fun to see them. It's still great to see Maximals in a movie.
Right, right.
But it's a lackluster Transformers film. It's just a lackluster movie in general, but it's not egregious. I wouldn't call this a bad movie. It's just really, really regular.
Right.
So I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 Maximal insignias.
Yeah, originally I had given it 3.5, which was the rating I had in my head when we went into this episode. But the more we kind of talked about it and kind of exposed some of its flaws, I agree. I think I'm gonna go with 3 as well. I think I'm gonna go 3 out of 5, which is I still like it. It's a turn your brain off kind of movie, but it's I could pop this in and I'll easily watch this over the last night any day of the week.
Oh
So,
yeah, twice on Sundays.
Right, exactly. So I wish that it had been better, but I don't think it's bad, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
3 out of 5 maximal insignias for me as well. So, well, we'd love to know what you think of Transformers: Rise of the Beast. You can always let us know at cinemaheroes.com. If you're on Instagram, comment on one of our posts, and if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below. Give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you however you want to reach out to us, but I think that wraps it up for this episode. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.